enforcing those policies and procedures. When it's compliance, it's like the gospel, okay? If it's commitment, it's more like guidelines. So in other words, if you're trying to build this culture of commitment in your team, then if you're overly focused on your policies and procedures, you're probably building a culture of compliance. And if you want to move in the direction of moving towards a culture of commitment, think about using those same policies and procedures more as guidelines and to help people in their decision making, right? To get them from point A to point B. But don't be so rigorous necessarily that we leave out the judgment piece. Cultures of compliance are fear-based. Cultures of commitment are values-based. Cultures of compliance are politics-driven, and cultures of commitment are principle-driven. Can you imagine why that might be? Any thoughts on that? Why would the culture of compliance be so political, but the culture of commitment much more principle-driven?
A lot of posture.
Yeah, and when you're trying to be too rigid and not looking at it more of the empowerment piece, right? How to empower people more. And so we want to look at, when we're building cultures of commitment, that we're starting to do things like give trust to others and their intentions. That we're starting to suspend judgment instead of always judging other people's actions, which tends to then end up in a lot of politics. Using the power of inquiry to promote dialogue. Okay, so this is kind of freeing people from their chains, so to speak. This is the more trying to bring out more of the human aspect of your work environment, right? That, we all have different views and different ways of seeing things, and a lot of times, if you can have the courage to have the conversation on it, then you get these incredible solutions you wouldn't get otherwise if you're too rigid in your approach. So I want you to think about that. How often are you being empowering to your team? Okay, giving them freedom. But okay, you have to give fences too, right? I mean, we work as a team in a corporation. There's certain things that are parameters we can't change. But are you empowering your team to do what they need to do? And are you addressing the politics to enable the principles to prevail? Or are you letting the politics run rampant in your team? Okay. So I want you to start thinking about this, and relative to your team, your project, and moving yourself forward. What are some of the things that need to change and shift? Are you conscious? If your group is highly political, do you know that? How would you know that? Any thoughts?
Just lots of side conversations sometimes versus like people coming together.
Yeah. What other things are? So that's a very good one. What other kinds of things indicate an organization that has a lot of politics?
Sometimes you start to have cliques develop between certain individuals, and then you have groupthink that could set in, and then those individuals tend to dominate certain discussions. I noticed that. Yeah,
so a lot of hierarchy and a lot of positioning and fragmentation going on in your teams. Yeah. So if you want to improve your leadership, you want to step back, okay, and start looking at your team and start looking for some of these things. And if it's going on, if you start to see it going on, then think, where do you start to change? So based on some of what we've started talking about today, where do you start to change?
Yourself.
Exactly. So the leader has to start to change. It's how you're leading that's creating that. The leader sets the tone. The leader sets the environment. So if politics are running rampant in your team, then you need to fix the politics, right? Because it's coming ultimately because of something that you're doing. So I want you to stop now and pause and have a moment of reflection. And while we're only able to really touch on each of these topics briefly, I want you to at least think about your project relative to the idea of building commitment. Maybe you didn't figure out what you're committed to, and that's the first step. What am I really committed to? If I'm in this job, am I committed to this job at all? Am I committed to the project that I'm assigned to? Am I committed to the people who are part of the team? What are you really committed to? And if you don't know, spend some time figuring that one out. But let's say you know, okay? Let's say that you have that one thing, and you know that you're deeply committed. And you know that you're so deeply committed that you can feel, just as the poem described, right? That things are shifting and changing because you really are that intent on making it happen. You're driven. So at that point, let's go back and start looking at some of these other things, right? Which is, all right, you're committed, but how do you get your team committed? What do you need to do differently so they feel that passion, they feel that sense of movement and that things are gonna move forward, okay? So take just a minute, just a couple of seconds, and write down something from what we talked about, okay? Maybe it's what you're committed to, maybe you're not, you've discovered what you're not committed to, it's something that you want to shift and change in your team, but write it down. And if you've got one that's part of your action plan, and you're willing to share it with the rest of the group, just raise your hand. Does anybody want to share their one thing, their one action plan that we want to take for building commitment? Yes.
Well, I want to build better communication between marketing and sales.
Okay.
Yeah, marketing. I used to be on the marketing side, now in sales. There's a lot of miscommunication.
Okay, so you want to improve the communication,
Yeah,
and you're
like-
committed to that.
Yeah, like in our sales meeting today, people are always complaining about leads, but instead of like complaining, why don't we be proactive and say something back to marketing? So that's what I'm thinking of now.
Okay, so, and maybe potentially some politics may be going on, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so maybe discussing some of the principles, that you want to abide by, right, as a team, to move it forward. That's a good one. Improving communications does a lot to improve commitment on a team. Okay, I'm going to push this forward for the sake of time, but that's the concept, okay? Figure out what it is that you need to change to move it forward. We're going to move on and talk about modeling passion and purpose. And here's a quote from Abraham Maslow, who's basically the founding father of the concept of self-actualization, right? Which is the idea that in each of us is fundamentally something that we are to come, right? Some seed that needs to blossom and grow to express ourselves. So a musician must make music, an artist must make paint, a poet must write, if he be at peace with himself. What a man can be, or a woman can be, right? She must be. So getting a better sense of what your passions are and what your purpose are helps you be a better leader for yourself, right? And for others. I had shared with you my story where when I started to feel my passion wane, it was like, something's really wrong. That's not typical for me. That's not normal for me. If I'm not feeling the passion for it, something's going to change because I can't work that way. I'm either all in or I don't want to be there. I want to move on. So if you are feeling passion, okay, then probably better chance you're on purpose, but passion is a feeling, okay? And you need to think about and go inside, what do you feel passionate about? And I'm going to tell you that, it's not necessarily easy for everybody to figure this one out. That I have a lot of people who will tell me, I don't know. And that's okay. Because that just means you're working in that unconscious zone, right? You just don't know yet. But you will. You'll figure it out if you spend some time on it. So it's important to start thinking, what do I have strong feelings about? Where are there emotions? Where do I want to move some things forward? And start to bring those out. Some of my passions, and this isn't all of them, but this is why I was so excited to come to talk to Whitty today. I love the topic of leadership. I spent inordinate amounts of time on it. It's kind of strange and weird. So I think it's got to be a passion because nobody else does this. This is just strange. And then technology is another one for me. I love new gadgets, things. I told Kathy coming in, this is so neat, the system up here, it can do all these things I've never seen before. I get all excited. Women. Not just women, the advancement of women is something I'm very passionate about. I showed you that flyer in the beginning, which was talking about trying to basically inspire more women to want to serve on boards and all. These are things I spend time on. Sometimes I sit back and go, I can't believe I'm spending this much time on this. And why? It's just because I'm naturally passionate about it and I can't stop myself. I just really can't. I just have to do it. It's inside of me. It's something I have to explore. I have to bring it to the surface. So I want you to start thinking about what your passions are. We're going to start with a quick exercise around values. And why values? Because it's typically easier for people to figure out what their values are than it is to figure out what the rest of their passions are. Your values tend to be an indication or help you figure out passions. Okay, so these are the things that you feel most strongly about. And I think, by the way, I first did my first core exercise, I swear it was in a Whitty, one of these Whitty presentations. And so if you've already done this, great, but it's always good to recheck in and make sure that you have the right list for yourself. If you can't remember what yours were, then you might not have gotten the right ones. Because if you want to get your values straight and identifying what your core values are, you kind of don't forget them. Why? Because you're passionate about them. So I want you to spend a few minutes and just look through. This is just a list. There could be many other things that your values could include, but this is a pick list. This is to make it easier. And try to circle the top 5 on here, or write in some, that are your values, your top values. And it has to pass the criteria that you feel passionate about it. When you've got your 5 and you're ready to share, can you just raise your hand? That's common.
I'm only
Yeah.
halfway
So it's
done.
hard. Sometimes it's hard to cut it back, right, to get it to those top 5. Yeah, that's the culling process, right? The paring it back. We all have often a lot of values, but trying to narrow it down helps you locate the center of where that passion is, right? Because the ones that are core values really will make your blood boil if they're not right, for example. So I see some head shaking, right? So what's one for you that makes your blood boil if it's not right? Authenticity, and we'll be talking about that a little bit more later. That's a good one. Mm-hmm.
Family.
Family, yes, very close to our hearts. Anything else? Anybody would mention is top of their list? Adventure. Very exciting. Sounds fun. You must be a fun person to be around. One of mine is integrity. If I sense a breach of integrity, my blood boils, and I have to address it. I have to. It's interesting because I think sometimes other people can help you figure out your values. That's when my husband helped me figure out. It was like, no, you know what? What's going on for you? Why you're so angry about this? It's a breach of integrity. It's like, oh, yeah, you're right. That's why. I'm needing to focus so much on this. So you've got your core values when it elicits emotion from inside. And again, that's the leadership side of this. Okay, this is the inside out job. This is where it starts with you first. It's figuring out what you're passionate about, what your values are, and good indication of where your passions are. And so start there. Okay, and if you didn't come up with your list tonight, then commit to sitting down and figuring it out later so that you have something to work with along that journey. Here's another question for you. What inspires you? Do you know? A lot of people don't know. For me, you'll see I use a lot of quotes. I find quotes inspiring. I love nature. I love the beauty of nature. I love the design of nature. I love when things have an incredible sense of design. It brings me peace. It's a sense of inspiration. People who are very committed. That inspires me. I think you'll find that it inspires your team when you figure out what you're really committed to. I want to know what you're inspired by. These are just things for me, but everybody's different. Any thoughts? What are you inspired by?
Yeah, I think I'd share. I know you mentioned talking about values and things like that. So one way things that are happening in my life right now that all ties back is I raise a couple of boys. I'm sure many of you have children. And so what's important to me is that they develop good communication skills. So I recognize that although I think I have pretty good communication skills, I wanted to improve it. So I've committed to improving it.
Nice.
And I found that this is also helping me at work.
Yeah.
So by working on something for myself that's congruent with how I see myself, it's helping me at work.
Yeah. Isn't that nice how that works?
Cool. Very cool. Like,
Yeah.
wow, this is a side benefit. I'm getting better at planning my meetings and my presentations because
Yeah.
I'm working on this.
And when you keep on working it, at some point you reach that level where you don't really have to work anymore. Now it's easy.
Right.
Now that neural pathway, it's there. It's a well-traveled path.
Well, like you talked about being awareness. Now that I'm aware of some of the things about communicating and presenting, things that you can learn at Toastmasters, for example, I thought I was good at what I did before, but now I see it completely differently.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, oh yeah, this is much more easier now for me to organize, my thoughts and what I want to do
Yeah.
because of this additional thing that I've been doing that I didn't take.
Well, you raised your
specifically
awareness.
for. Yeah.
And now you're looking, right? Now
Right.
you're probably studying other people,
Yeah.
communications, and now it's
Oh yeah, now I
just
got us
that.
with everything. YouTube
Yeah.
videos, everything.
Yeah. And that's where that conscious confidence is coming in. Now it's like,
Right.
oh, you're just taking it all in, and it's all becoming something that's starting to work, and you're putting those pieces of the picture together. That's a great example. Does anybody else have another one that they would like to share? What inspires you? Yes.
It's not work related, but
That's okay.
Watching the beautiful dances, like the ballroom dancing, graceful
uh-huh.
people dance, really inspires me. Like
Wonderful.
it's motivating.
A form of art.
Like that.
Dance. Yes. Many forms of art people find inspiring. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Solving problems.
Ooh,
Really,
nice.
it's
Mhm.
exciting.
Yeah, like when you get it right and you figure it out. Yeah, that is inspiring, absolutely. And it's so important, right? Especially if you're in a technology field and there's all these problems to solve, right? And if you can be the one who figures it out, you're going to be inspiring the people around you. You know, so that is a nice one, especially that applies to the work environment. Last one, anybody else? Something that inspired you?
Seeing potential in my associates that don't see their own potential and helping
Yes.
them get there.
That inspires me
I'm
too.
so driven by it. I
Yes.
love it, and I just
Mhm.
it's like a project.
Because you can see it,
Yeah.
but they can't yet.
Right.
And you're going to help them see it.
It's the problem solving.
And you're gonna help them get there. Yeah, that's a fun one to have because you're really helping people and making a difference for them. Yeah, it's actually I have a client who was just telling me that same exact thing yesterday. That is what makes him tick. That's what he lives for. That it inspires him, and he's really, really, really good at it.
It is.
And so when you can make a difference in somebody else's life and help them along their journey in path,
Yeah.
it's a feel good, right? And it's a great leadership. It's a great demonstration of leadership. So we're gonna move on, and I'm gonna talk for just a little bit about this thing called purpose. And the reason I'm not gonna talk a lot about it is because I could talk a lot more about it. We could spend all night. You know, we could spend a whole week on this one because it's a really in-depth topic. So we're just gonna kind of skim the surface, okay? But at least get you started and thinking about your purpose. Now, there's a lot of literature out there today about purpose. Over the last 4 years, I would say it's become just this big wave of, a lot of people are focused on it now. You'll see a lot more writing about it. I have articles saved from like 6 and 7 years ago, and now I'm seeing like this uptick where there's more of them that are coming out about the whole idea of individuals and businesses finding purpose. And in fact, just here for the month of May, Harvard Business Review has a very nice article about purpose to impact. I define it very specifically, okay, just to help kind of get this very gnarly topic to give it some form and structure. Purpose, the difference that you want to make in the world. Okay, quite simply. You can think of it as your lighthouse, that's that thing that guides you. You can think of it as that compass, you know, something that you can pull out. Your purpose will help guide you, direct you to the right place. You can think of it as your GPS, most of your technology ladies, so this one might apply, right? You know, it's your finding device. It helps orient you, get you moving. It helps get you there. So if you think about your purpose being the difference that you wish to make in the world, finding that purpose can be something that, so once you land on it and you figure out what it is, really makes a difference in not only leading yourself, but leading other people. Because people can sense, because it's inspiring, when somebody else is living with a sense of purpose. You probably know at least maybe one person that you've worked with or in your life, in your personal life, that you can see they live with a sense of purpose. Not necessarily that they told you what their purpose statement is, right? But you can tell. So here's some ideas from you. These are just random, indicators, things that might or might not apply to you in your work or your personal life. But if you're in business, you might be measuring sales and marketing in some particular way, or the production output in a particular way, the quality. It might be the HR pieces, the financial pieces. It may even be in your work, the relationships at work. Somehow you want to measure that. I actually remember some of the examples before, just talking about the communications in the group. That's something that you want to start figure out a good way to measure that. Sometimes it's not intuitively obvious, but you can figure out a way to measure it. Career development. Start to think about that. Are you moving it forward, your career, in a way that you want? Or do you have an indicator for that? And then on the personal side, here's some examples, okay? So now what I want you to do, just in using these as just some thoughts, this is one, again, sales calls per week, could be a BSI for sales and marketing. Quality of relationships with your spouse and children. That could be a PSI for the relationships in your family. So these are just some categories to think about. So think. Take the time, the moment, to just have a reflection and hopefully a moment of insight about how you're measuring your business and personal success. And if somebody already has one that they want to share, just raise your hand.
My inbox. How much is in my inbox?
Okay. So you know it's success when what? When it's full or when you've gotten through them all?
No, when it's minimized.
When it's minimized.
Which is not often.
Yes. Okay. So getting through the inbox. That's a good indicator. Mhm.
We could have a whole workshop on that.
Yes.
How to get the inbox.
One more.
Yes.
So the feeling that I have when I leave my work, if I'm happy, it's success.
Ah.
And
Okay.
then
A feeling.
the-
So you're measuring it by a feeling, a sense
Yeah.
of maybe accomplishment.
Yes.
Okay. And how do you measure that accomplishment?
Oh, I feel positive, I feel happy. I'm driving
Okay. So
home.
it is just it goes back to the feeling again for you.
Yeah, and
Okay.
going back to the feeling.
And you know what? I think for certain styles, that's a valid measurement, right? I mean, there are people that feeling element is a big part of their personality, and that for you will work, and I encourage you to use it, right? So you can measure that every single day. How did it feel when I left work today? And one more example of an indicator: personal life or business life. Yes.
Business side.
Okay.
Obtain a professional certification by August 24th.
Okay, so keeping that certification going and making sure that it's done on time is a success indicator for you. You want to make sure that you're well qualified, you have all the right certifications to do your job, and that's valid. You know, and so just having this core critical set in mind can help you drive the right things getting done, and can help you to sometimes not forget about things that are important to you. So for example, if the quality of your relationships at home are important to you, and you try to keep that one as one of your PSIs, personal success indicators, right? And you come back and you think about that once in a while, and let's just say that starts to veer off course and you start thinking about it, it's like, oh, yep, I said that's important. And if I'm doing so much work now that the quality of my home relationships is starting to fade, then I need to readjust, right? That ultimately, if you step up from that, you know, having your business success but not having your personal success too, is it worth it, right? So you have to think about that and how you might need to shift some of your time and some of your energy. So we're going to take just one more minute here. And I told you we would move really fast through this section because I thought you would all be probably pretty good at this, and I think that you are. And just choose, what's that one thing that you want to do better for your own leadership or for the leadership of your team? Maybe your team doesn't have good success metrics. Maybe they're not really sure how they're being measured. And that can be frustrating, right? If you're not really sure what the target is, the goal is, if you're just kind of going along. So you might need to develop something for yourself. You might need to develop something for your team. So think about what that is. Anybody have something that they want to share that's their action plan coming out? I'm thinking about operational excellence for yourself and your team. Everybody looks very contemplative on this one. Yes.
Looking at how to create capacity on our team, so we have more time to do strategic work, and looking at how we control these processes.
To be more efficient. Is that what I heard? Okay, so you're measuring efficiency. And does the whole team know that?
So we have several.
Okay, good. Well, good.
Because they've all been contributing to the spreadsheet that we put together.
Great. Yes, but clarity. I think really people appreciate when they know how they're being measured, right? And ultimately what's going to make a difference. And when you, at the end of the year you say how things went, right? So we're going to move now to these last two, the R and the E. And these are the right brain ones. And they're going to be a little bit harder, a little bit, I say harder, meaning, you know, you kind of have to peel back the onion, so to speak, on these a little bit more. And here's a quote for you around authenticity. And I remember Kathy mentioning that this was an area of interest in particular for this group too, this whole idea of authentic leadership. So I know already that there's some energy around this, right? And so let me just ask you the question, like, what does it feel like when you're around somebody who you know is inauthentic? What's the feeling?
Yeah, it makes you uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable, yeah. So it's a sense of, something doesn't feel right. So we can sense it, right, as human beings. And so what I want you to really look at now is, because we always start with ourselves first, right? Are you being authentic? Okay, and ask you that question. So what's the hardcore truth? Are you always being authentic at work? Or are you trying to be maybe someone you're not, something you're not? Is it not somehow happening where you're able to freely express who you are? And if that's happening, then that's a really good thing to step back and start working on. Because that can mean any number of things. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're an inauthentic person. It just means maybe that environment is somehow not the right environment for you. Or maybe there's something that you're afraid to express about who you are, for any number of reasons. So it doesn't necessarily always mean that fundamentally that person doesn't have an authentic self that can be described. It just means that situationally it's not coming out right and something needs to be adjusted. So the way that you can start to think of authenticity, I'm going to give you a couple of different tools, okay? One is becoming the observer. So the picture here of the eagle is the whole idea is if you can really step up and start to watch yourself, then you can start to see if you're really being authentic, okay? This whole idea of almost like having a little Jiminy Cricket, that's on your shoulders, watching you and kind of telling you, this is what's really going on. Did you lose your conscience here? Are you really being who you want to be? And sometimes it can be that it can be interesting, like the feedback that you get from people. Okay, can be an indicator of authenticity. I remember at one point in my career, I remember some of my direct reports telling me just the consistent feedback was just very professional, very professional. I thought, that's kind of strange. In other words, it's good to be professional at work, but if that's my feedback, then maybe I'm just not coming off personally enough. Maybe there's something to shift or change there because, you want to be professional, but you don't want that to be like the only thing that people are saying, right, about you. So it made me kind of step back and start self-observing and going, can I be more personal then? Can I be a little bit more of myself and just not, just straight professional? And because sometimes our environments, right, can create that kind of like stiffness. But people don't really like stiffness, right? Do you want to work for somebody who's stiff? No. You don't want to really be around that, right? So start to become your own observer of yourself. How are you behaving? How are you coming off to other people? And you really do have to step out of yourself. It's like an out-of-body experience, right? It's really kind of like, watch what you do, how you interact, and see if there's something that can't be improved there. I want to talk about, briefly, this whole idea of relating, and that there's 3 different worlds. And this is an idea, and I'm sorry, I see that these are harder to read down here, but it's an I and a we and an it. And this might seem kind of obvious, but this is a concept that was brought to, when I was working at Intel actually, by another coach consultant, and I thought it was just so appropriate for the environment that we were in at the time, which is, at the time we were so stuck in this it world, the data, it was like, at some point there was nothing about people anymore. Where's the we part of it, the relationship part of it? What about that? I'm an individual. You know what I mean? I'm not just a cog in a wheel, and I want to talk about me sometimes. Is that okay, right? And I think that is something that every environment needs, every individual needs to be able to express themselves, and you need to figure out the relationships. And if your world becomes too much about the it's, and you lose the I's and the we's, then there's something that's missing, right? Yes.
Well, I think we also have to avoid the word they. I'm
Yes.
good with the I's and the we's, but never good with they.
Yeah, that's a good point.
They means you're completely, they're making me do it, and you know what I
Who's
mean?
they?
Who
Yeah.
is they?
They management?
Who is
I mean,
they?
that's like the really bad one, is management.
So there's